Hello there, my name's Card, and as long as I can remember, I've always liked poetry. I enjoy reading it, enjoy analysing it, and I even have a go at writing a bit of it myself every now and then. And whenever I'm discussing poetry with people nowadays, I've noticed that inevitably, and often pretty quickly, they bring up Rupi Kaur. And unfortunately, it's usually just to attack her and her work without putting too much thought into how and why it became so popular. But what I'd like to do today is just really briefly articulate why that is. Only if so, the next time the topic comes up, I'll have something to refer back to for my own sake. If you're watching this, one way or another, you most likely already know who Rupi Kaur is. But just in case you don't, Kaur is a young, female Indian-Canadian poet who grew a modest following posting her work to Instagram and who shot to the top of bestseller lists everywhere, basically overnight, with a self-published book of poems called Milk and Honey back in 2015. Here's the thing. All of her poems are incredibly simple. The average Kaur poem is about a dozen words, broken into around 4 lines, no rhyme scheme, no punctuation, not a great deal of apparent subtext, and to boot, they're even typeset about as simplistically as possible too, like 12-point Times New Roman on a blank background simple. This short-form 3-verse stuff of hers is extremely popular with a certain type of poetry aficionado on websites like Instagram and Tumblr. But Kaur's debut book attracted just as much of a rabid anti-fan base that have spent the years since basically just trying to tear her down. I think it's really unfortunate that a lot of people feel they need to jump onto the bandwagon of hating this stuff. Further still, I see a lot of people have this knee-jerk reaction to her work and then immediately declare that people like Kaur are ruining the modern poetry scene and that everyone who's ever bought her book is just some vapid consumer who doesn't know what, open quote, real poetry is. People jump to their own conclusions without bothering to find out the story behind how and why she got so popular. And firstly, Kaur had been writing and performing poetry since at least 2009. She's got plenty of experience in the medium, and probably a lot more of it than most of the internet gatekeepers that dismiss her without a second thought. That being said, her initial following was pretty small, and it stayed that way for years, basically just growing slowly by word of mouth. Then, in 2015, Kaur posts a series of personal images on Instagram depicting menstrual bloodstains on her clothing, as part of an attempt to destigmatize women's health issues. A handful of online trolls harassed her over the pictures and eventually used mass false reporting to get them taken down as an Instagram terms of service violation. When the reporting basically triggers an automatic takedown of some innocuous pictures of hers, Kaur basically responds by penning an open letter calling the trolls' actions out. Instagram then apologized and reversed the mistaken takedown, and the company's response went viral shortly thereafter. That's what first brought Kaur attention, an attempt by some anonymous trolls to censor her of all things. With that, an actual sizable online audience came snowballing in. Her stuff got picked up algorithmically, and that in turn just brought in bigger and bigger crowds. The same went for her Milk and Honey collection of poetry shortly after. Once sales properly took off, that momentum only carried it further and further, until it eventually spent more than a straight year at the top of the New York Times bestsellers list. Now, this self-published 20-something was the world's most popular living poet. But what people need to stop doing is dogpiling on her work unnecessarily at every turn. If you happen to go anywhere online that discusses poetry, I promise you, as soon as Kaur's name gets brought up, people just won't hesitate to call her poetry trash. Now, personally, I will say I'm not a huge fan of her style, but I'm not one of those online LARPers who pretends to love all the classics, and I do prefer stuff that is a bit more long form or rhymes or tells more of a conventional story. But I can't help but feel that almost every negative comment about her you see online is either some bitter crabs-in-a-bucket style resentment of her commercial success, or someone just looking to attack a popular figure because they can. And especially with the latter, you can't help but think that a lot of people who want to tear her down particularly want to do so because she's A, non-white, and B, a woman, and they're mad that a brown girl's made it as a writer and they haven't. Call me an SJW in the comments all you want. I don't care, and I know I'm right. And personally, I don't think Charles Bukowski is anything worth writing home about either. But all the elitist poetry incels love his trite free verse for some white male reason. The way I see it, Rupi Kaur has done more to get people into reading and writing poetry than just about anyone else in living memory, and I for one definitely welcome that. I don't think it's anyone's job to try and decide what is and is not real poetry. And if people are reading Kaur's stuff, enjoying it and getting something worthwhile out of it for themselves, I'm happy for them, and I'm happy they're enjoying literature. Remember, there's nothing inherently better about older poetry just because it's older or it conforms to some arbitrary standards made up 100 years ago. And frankly, shame on anyone who aspires towards a creative career themselves, who then tears down another artist for quote-unquote undeserved success. At the end of the day, who does and doesn't make it as a writer in this commercialized world basically comes down to just luck and happenstance, and I'm happy for anyone who does manage to break through. That's just my 2 cents on the matter. Thank you for listening. Once again, my name's Card, and feel free to subscribe to this YouTube page if you feel you might want to hear more from me again in the future. Bye for now, and have a lovely day.